this is an absolute privilege to be able to introduce Professor Bud Hall, is in the same area as Elaine earlier, which is Lekwungen speaking First Nations territory on the Vancouver Island, or what Canadians would call Vancouver Island. I hope that was clear enough. Sorry, Bud, fluffing my lines. Bud's been interested in the interaction between learning, knowledge, accumulation and forms of action since 1964, when he was a uni student at the University of Nigeria, where he first encountered the concept of Afrocentric scholarship. His learning has been influenced by the ideas of Paulo Freire, Julius Nyerere, the founding president of Tanzania, excuse any pronunciation, Nita Barrow of Barbados, Professor Wanotsa Lorna Williams, a Lilwat First Nations elder, Dr. Darlene Clover, a feminist scholar activist, Unduwala Wangula, founder of the Mbapo African Multiversity, and Dr. Rajesh Tandon, founder of Participatory Research in Asia. Flipping heck. John Gaventa, originally of the Highlander Folk School in the USA, and Murray Thompson, Canada's leading peace educator, and so many others. Bud has earned a living working with and for an NGO, the International Council for Adult Education, then as an academic at the Universities of Toronto and Victoria, and he is currently working with his friend and colleague Rajesh Tandon under the umbrella of the UNESCO Chair in Community-Based Research and Social Responsibility in Higher Education. He is a father of 2 sons and a grandfather of 3 grandsons, and he is also a poet. And blimey, is he a poet. The first time I met Bud, and there's just a little thing, just as the mark of the man that you see, and as working class academics, I took maybe 7 students. We went to Huddersfield Uni, and everybody there was an academic. Huddersfield Uni has got its own nuanced thing. I think it's a very nice place. But we were going to see Bud Hall, and there were people from all over the country had gone to this thing. And I'd emailed him because there was a poem in the Concept Journal. It was 50 years since Paulo Freire had published Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And Bud, who was a friend of Paulo Freire's, had written a poem about him and recounted some of the experiences with him. And I sent an email saying, can you, is there a recording of this that I can use and share with students? You know, just thinking I'll never hear from that again. But within an hour, I had an email back. And he said, yeah, of course. He said, I don't have one, but you can do one. And so when we got there to Huddersfield, he met with the students. He was really friendly, and he was just brilliant. So that's the mark of the man I think that fits most with this conference, because obviously it's a glittering career. It's a fabulous range of things. But I just want to check him on and let him talk. And thanks.
Oh my goodness, Peter, after all that, I think we should all just have a cup of tea or a beer and drift off and feel the wonderful spirit of the conference. Yeah. Well, after that, I guess I'm obliged to share a few thoughts. You know, like many of you, I've been overwhelmed with the power, you know, the authenticity, the emotional strength, and the intellectual brilliance that we've been hearing in the last couple of days. And in thinking about what I could do, you know, I've really crafted some words really as a gift, really as a contribution, as a, you know, I would call it a love letter to all of you and to this extraordinary event. So I think that this event, you know, it deserves you know, some special you know, intellectual and emotional final contribution. So I hope that what my modest, you know, comments might I hope they might be appreciated, you know, in the spirit with which they are offered. So I would like to begin, as we do in my part of the world, with acknowledging that we live on the unceded territory of the, Peter, you did a great job, Lekwungen speaking people, Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich. The colonial name the island where I live on is Vancouver, named after the first white man to visit. After 14,000 years, one white guy showed up and they named the island after him. We are found on the west coast of Canada in the Pacific, on the Pacific Ocean. My city is called Victoria, and our local newspaper is called the Times Colonist. Nothing more, I think, needs saying. Secondly, I would like to formally acknowledge and pay tribute to the very many people who have brought this extraordinary event together. In the West Coast Indigenous traditions, when people are thanked, we raise our hands to them saying Haichka. Haichka means thank you in the Sinchothan language. And I raise my hands to Peter Shuki, Ahina Suleiman, Jeanette Alvarado Cruz, Amina Khan, Craig Hammond, Salim Sidat, Jamie Holman, Alex Dunedin, Alexandra Shuki, Kick Down the Barriers, the Ragged University, and to my doctoral student at the University of Victoria, Elaine Laberge, whose poem we heard not too long ago. Your insights and Elaine's insights into kicking down the walls and doors continue to inform me. Each of you, all of you whose names I've not mentioned, have collectively created a unique space of dissonance, resistance, creativity, joy, rage, hope, and imagination. I am so honored to be among you and honored by this opportunity to learn from and with you and all of the participants in this event. I am a colonial settler Canadian, a descendant of a family originally from Staffordshire, England. My great-grandparents came to Vancouver Island in the 1860s to get land for themselves and their children. The land that they purchased for about 50p, or $1 Canadian per acre, had been stolen from the Hullalt First Nations, the indigenous people who have been custodians on that land for over 14,000 years. That land propelled my family into middle-class status and built a legacy of privilege for their dependents, which includes me, that I continue to benefit from. In fact, if it were not for that stolen land, I would never have attended university nor gotten a job in academia. In fact, neither Peter nor any of the rest of you would ever have heard of me. I share this story because it reminds me that the particular pathway that has taken me to be with you today cannot be attributed to some unusual or special characteristics or skills which I possess. I am here today in large measure because of the invisible backpack of privilege that speaks for me so that my words are not even needed. I benefit from white privilege, from patriarchal privilege, from being a binary male, from English as a mother tongue privilege, and deeply from middle class privilege. When we read ancient or contemporary history about success in any aspect of life, we are to be reminded that the very structure of success is mounted on an invisible scaffolding of working class labor or stolen indigenous lands, of the invisible labor of women, on slavery, and on contemporary low wages in many parts of the global South. And whatever else the pandemic has brought us, it has pulled back the curtain that has hidden social class and racial exclusion and oppression. And have, through the education of hard work, through hard work, equal chances to rise in class terms is utterly false. So my most important message to all of you listening today is congratulations. Neither history nor capitalism would have predicted or appreciated an international conference of working class academics. None of you are supposed to be here. Whatever wonders lie ahead for all of us associated with this event, We have already done something that was never supposed to happen. This combination of women and men, races, ethnicities, sexualities, ages, disciplines were never supposed to have been together in this way. This is subversive. This is divergent. This is disobedient. This is, dare I say, revolutionary. Let us remind ourselves of an earlier would-be working class scholar's experiences. This story begins in 1895, where we learn about the character of Jude, the stonemason determined to learn so as to become a minister. I am indebted to the late David Watson, historian and adult educator, for his bringing to my attention the Thomas Hardy book, Jude the Obscure. Jude is a poor stonemason determined to become a scholar of note. In the course of his self-directed learning, he decides that Oxford University would be the place to engage with fellow scholars. The resistance offered by the Oxford of the day to Jude's efforts to learn amongst them is brutal. Jude is thrilled in seeing the spires of Oxford as he visits there, seeking admission after many years of learning on his own. He learns brutally that Oxford was not ready for the self-taught intellectual. The master of Balliol College, after listening to Jude's request to study there, tells Jude, "I venture to think that you will have a much better chance of success in life by remaining in your own sphere." Jude begins to understand the differences between the knowledge of the community and the knowledge of the academy. Jude began to see that the town life where he had been was a book of humanity infinitely more palpitating, varied, and compendious than gown life. Let me use Jude's last sentence. That town life was a book of humanity infinitely more palpitating, varied, and compendious than gown life. Let me use this as a link to the concept of knowledge democracy. In the excellent video about the conference, Peter Schucke noted in so many words that working class origins, far from being about a deficit, are really about an asset. Like Jude says, the life of the town, of the streets, of the social movements, of the neighborhoods, of the land are rich, palpitating, and compendious. Working class academics and working class students are the ways in which this energy, this variety of knowledge, and these values can find their ways into higher education. But finding a way in for these ways of thinking is not easy. What is called the Western canon, the body of Eurocentric knowledge, has so monopolized and silenced other ways of knowing over the past 500 years that one of our Portuguese colleagues, de Sousa Santos, says that we have experienced and continue to experience epistemicide, or the killing of other knowledge systems. His work specifically refers to the way in which Eurocentric knowledge has eliminated the diverse knowledge systems of the global South and of the indigenous land-based people. But the same can be said for class-based knowledge. Historians are familiar with the idea that history is written by the victors. Feminists are familiar with the reality that history has largely been written by men. In Canada, we know that our history has been told by non-Indigenous people. From a class perspective, it is true that academic knowledge has largely been written by non-working class scholars. Regardless of the discipline, explanations and understandings of the world that we all live in has been written by non-working class scholars and intellectuals. This does not mean that all academic work written by, by non-working class scholars has not been useful, Both Marx and Engels came from bourgeois backgrounds. Paulo Freire, the Brazilian scholar activist who wrote Pedagogy of the Oppressed, was raised in a privileged household in northeastern Brazil. Even Gandhi came from a privileged background. But these authors are the exception. They are, to be sure, intellectual allies and even useful guides. But when one thinks about the vast body of academic knowledge, the absence of scholarship written by working class intellectuals stands out. We are missing what Jude said in the 19th century could be found in the streets and the homes of our communities. Knowledge that is more palpitating, varied, and compendious. But how did this come to pass? If knowledge making is a skill that all people possess, how is it that the power to name the world in contemporary times has been restricted to an academic elite? How has this dispossession happened? The geographer David Harvey has provided us with the suggestion that capital accumulation, our contemporary capitalist economic system, began through the process of dispossession. Dispossessing people of access to their land, he suggests, lies at the heart of early capital accumulation. The story of my family's transformation through the dispossession of the lands of the Hullalt First Nations is one example. Harvey draws attention to the process in the 14th and through 17th century England, which removed people from their land through what has been become known as the enclosures. He tells us of wealthy landowners who use force and even arms to transform the traditional open fields and communal pastures into private property for their own profit. A similar process occurred with the clans of Scotland, which was so widespread in their dispositions that they became known as clearances. Each of these acts of dispossession left the majority people without access to land and allowed for wealth to accumulate to those who are now known as private landowners. New categories of people were defined: the landed gentry, the workers in the estates, the land and the landless. Lest you think that these acts went unnoticed, let us recall the words of an English rhyme from the period. The law condemns the woman or man who steals the goose from off the common, but leaves the greater felon loose who steals the common from the goose. Several years ago, I had the opportunity to speak a few days in one of the Oxford colleges, perhaps the one that our fictional working class Jude visited. It was a college that was created at the same time as the enclosures. I entered the college through a low doorway only accessible to students and fellows and their guests. The college was walled in and only accessible through one or two guarded entryways. While staying in the college, the linkage between the enclosing of previously common land for private purposes and the creation of walled spaces for learning became disturbingly apparent. The act of creating Oxford and the other medieval universities was an act of enclosing knowledge. Limiting access to knowledge, exerting a form of control over knowledge, and providing a means for a small elite to acquire this knowledge for purposes of leadership of a spiritual nature, of a governance nature, or of a cultural nature. Those within the walls, outside the wall, became non-knowers. Knowledge was removed from the land, from the workplace, from relationships with the land. The enclosing of the academy dispossessed the vast majority of working class knowledge keepers, forever relegating their knowledge to witchcraft, tradition, superstition, folkways, or at best some form of common sense. So one of the characteristics of of traditional academia, I would say, the majority of, you know, of traditional, middle class elite academics, is that, including, including all of our progressive brothers and sisters, is that we are very eloquent, and often, stunningly insightful on the issue of critique. But we are often silent or very vague when it comes to create. So one of the things that has been so exciting during yesterday and today has been hearing so many, I would say every single one of you who has spoken, has contained in your remarks not only elements of critique, which we must have to be able to understand who we are and what the task that is which faces us, but you have all included, elements of create. What do we need to create if we're to transform, these spaces of higher education? So one of the qualities of excellent working class scholarship is that attention is given to the question of creation. Accepting the many reasonable explanations for the exclusion of working class knowledge and working class scholars, what might we imagine for a truly inclusive university? The seeds of some of the seeds of some of what we would like to see has been shared by various colleagues, I would say by all of you. But first of all, I think, we would all agree that we need to see more conferences, seminars, working groups, gatherings of all sorts, such as this conference by working class academics who live and work actually in every part of the world. It should not be exceptional or unique for people like ourselves to gather together. I would like to use three themes that have been presented in this conference to open up our imaginations about what a truly inclusive higher education institution might look like. You have offered me many, many more ideas, but let me draw on these as a starting point, and we can add to these ideas, in the follow-up to this conference, as we think about what somebody talked about the working class academic university might look like. The three that I've chosen to draw on are the three concepts that I've chosen to draw on are creative placemaking that Christian Bell offered us, zine making that Christy Fife offered us, and Ian Duckett's comments, ideas on curriculum and class. So Christian asks whether a community of creatives might be the basis for a new narrative about learning action and higher education in the working class town of Blackburn. Several exciting elements to this question. First of all is the notion of place. Place, land, location, roots are all fundamental to building a knowledge base which draws on the knowledge of everyday people for change in a community. He speaks of action research, what Rajesh and I would refer to as participatory research, a knowledge accumulation process where the research questions come from the place, from the community. He speaks of creatives, people who construct and share knowledge in artistic ways. The research focus would come from the questions in the community itself, not from an academic journal. The university or higher education institute would have deep, organic, structural relationships with the community, with the trade union structures, with the social and ecological justice organizations, Black Lives Matters, other equity movements. If we think about Christy Fife's contribution from her experience as a zine maker, zine making as an educational and action-oriented form of knowledge making. This builds, of course, on Christian's experience as a creative. In our work on knowledge democracy, work that Rajesh Tandon and I, have been involved in over the years, we speak of the need as scholars to explore the use of the arts as a tool for knowledge making and sharing. Zines, poems, dance, theater, ceremony, murals, quilts, and more. This is because the arts allow for an integration of cognitive and affective knowing. Zines, and through their disruption of the printed form, allow for emotions to come onto a page in a way that linear text often does not. Poetry, as we heard from Elaine Laberge just earlier today, allows us to feel as well as to learn cognitively. The inclusive university that we imagine, one where working class scholars and working class students are comfortable and supported, will be a creative space where emotions and logic are never far apart and the action for change is a given. Now, turning to Ian's contribution on curriculum and class, how do these come together in our vision, in our imagination of an inclusive university? Ian says something quite important. Working class skills have been narrowed, undervalued, and downgraded by the ruling class. He was speaking specifically about the skills agenda that governments all over the world have been spreading through adult education and further education programs. The skills favored by government programs are those which global capital needs so that workers everywhere can plug into the global assembly lines. We can extrapolate from Ian's reference, however, to the entire curriculum of higher education. As I said in my earlier comments, our knowledge base is limited for historic reasons to a Eurocentric, white, mostly male Ken. This knowledge base is also limited by the exclusion of working class knowledge, knowledge of racialized communities, women, youth, the differently abled, and more. So the curriculum of our reimagined universities will need to be locally placed, supportive of community-driven participatory action research, open to arts-based research and pedagogy, and incorporating working class skills and knowledge. Skills of community building, skills of resilience, skills of advocacy, solidarity, ceremony, confronting authority, and more. And what more? Joy and hope. In closing, I'd like to dedicate two poems to all of you. The first is a short piece written by the great the educational genius, the poet, the Indian poet Rabindranath Tagore, who wrote this piece in 1916. Listen to these words, 1916 it was written. I know what a risk one runs in being styled an idealist in these days when the sound that drowns all voices is the noise of the marketplace. And yet, I feel that the sky and the earth and the lyrics of the dawn and the dayfall are with the poets and the idealists and not with the market men. I'm going to it's so short. I know what a risk one runs in being styled an idealist in these days when the sound that drowns all voices is the noise of the marketplace. And yet I feel that the sky and the earth and the lyrics of the dawn and the dayfall are with the poets and the idealists and not with the market men. And my last gift offering to all of you with in all respect, in all admiration for the work that you do, is an adaptation of a poem that Lawrence Ferlinghetti, the wonderful beat poet of the 1950s, who at 101 years old is still living in San Francisco. This piece was written in 1975, but I have adapted it, as you will hear, for this conference. And the title of the poem is Working Class Academics as Insurgent Artists. I am signaling you through the flames. The North Pole is not where it used to be. Manifest destiny is no longer manifest. Civilization self-destructs. Nemesis is knocking at the door. What are working class academics for in such an age? What is the use of working class academic work? The printing press made poetry so silent it lost its song. Make it sing again. If you would be a working class academic, create works capable of answering the challenges of apocalyptic times, even if this means sounding apocalyptic. If you would be a working class academic, write living newspapers, be a reporter from outer space, filing dispatches to some supreme managing editor who believes in full disclosure and has a low tolerance for bullshit. If you would be a working class academic, experiment with all manner of poetics, erotic broken grammars, ecstatic religions, heathen outpourings, speaking in tongues, bombastic public speech, automatic scribbling, surrealist sensing, streams of consciousness, found sound, rants and raves to create your own your own limbic, your own underlying, your Ur voice. If you would call yourself a working class academic, don't just sit there. Working class academic work is not a sedentary occupation, not a take your seat practice. Stand up and let them have it. Have wide-angled vision, each look a world glance. Express vast clarity of the outside world, the sun that sees us all, the moon that strews its shadow upon us, quiet garden ponds, willows where the hidden thrush sings, dusk falling along the river run, and the great spaces that open out to the sea, high tide, and the heron's call, and the people, and the people. The people, yes, all around the earth, speaking in babble tongues, give voice to them all. Thank you very much.
But I didn't want to leave you hanging on at the end of that. But I was there. You took me somewhere else. And that was the second time I've heard it. It was still so much. But yeah, that was absolutely brilliant. Everybody's clapping. The things are going crazy. Twitter's been going crazy too. That was just absolutely beautiful. I don't know if we've got questions. Have we got questions? Oh,
we need a song. We need a song. Where's the song?
Gavin says, Bud, it's a random question. You may ignore if you want, but where in Staffordshire?
Let's see, where in Staffordshire? Is it a place called Exeter? Is that a town in Staffordshire? I believe it is.
Uttoxeter.
Uttoxeter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where that's.
Yeah.
And of course, they were totally impoverished. You can imagine, taking your kids to some godforsaken cold place, thinking that would be a better place, and they were, landless, totally impoverished, and so they left.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. They have in Wigan. They have every year still, and like these things that they always tend to be small amount events, but they have the Diggers Festival. The idea of reclaiming the land and the power that brings with that, and the political movements, but also the inevitable being crushed that brings for these smaller groups. We've got to find a different way of doing it, and a way that leaves us not just being folk festivals and small groupings. It's got to be more powerful than that. And well, with people like you, Bud, that's exactly how that works. And you're an inspiration to us, and we're going to be an inspiration to others, and we keep it going. I think that's the beauty.
And you are an inspiration to me.
Well, I think it's been an inspirational 2 days. It's been incredible. Caroline says she needs this poem. Well, we've got this recording, and I've also got the paperwork because you've sent it to me. So we're going to put those together, so you will have that. And actually, yeah, I mean, there is something beautiful about that. And I want to introduce you to somebody now, Bud, who's something of a surprise late admission. And I'm going to let Lou Mycroft do it. But your poetry there was the perfect end to this, and as something of a surprise that's just occurred on Twitter in the last hour. We had something of an event ourselves of negative impact a few years ago, and what led to the well, I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to go over to Lou, because otherwise it'll spoil it. We've got two people. Lou's not the surprise, although she's always lovely to have. But I'm going to introduce Bud to Lou, who's going to introduce you to someone else.
Hiya, Bud. It's so lovely to see you again, and that was just beautiful. Okay, so right, about an hour ago on Twitter, all day I've been crying, as you might imagine, and I'm going to probably unpack my whole psyche on Twitter tonight after a couple of glasses of wine. I've been crying, I've been comfort eating. So about an hour ago, what I came across on the Twitter feed for the conference was a really beautiful piece of what my mum calls church window cake, and you may know as Battenberg, and I thought, oh, that's beautiful. I could just eat a piece of church window cake, but it was even better than that, because the church window cake was attached to a poem called Posh Things, which was a gift for us at the conference. And the guy who wrote that poem, who is an absolute hero of mine, and you proper are, has agreed to come in and actually close our conference with another poem. So I just want to say a few words about Tony Walsh, Longfellow poet, Manchester's poet, who I am sure all of you know, certainly in the north of England, and I'm sure much further. In May 2017, after the Manchester bombing, Tony spoke to us from the heart about Manchester, a city that's very dear to me, a city that is half of my son. And he talked to us about Manchester's defiant, compassionate, creative spirit through the words of his poem, This Is the Place. And this is the place that Tony has described somewhere, is part of the fabric of Manchester now. It's a book, it's a fundraising campaign, it's been music, it's absolutely, brought, and the city is full of bees, on the back of all of this. So I would just like to shut up now and introduce you to the fabulous Tony Walsh, Longfellow the poet, and he is going to close our circle by reading his poem Tough from Common People. Thank you so much, Tony.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. What an absolute privilege it is to join this event, even so late in the day. That last poem, Bud, it absolutely spoke to my soul. Thank you for sharing that. I need very much to track that down. As we've just heard, I've shared on the Twitter feed there my poem Posh Things, which is about growing up poor, not working class poor, that word, across the 60s and 70s. I've written poetry since I was 5 and 6 years of age, but the system never saw this in me, never encouraged this in me. My father didn't get a lot of schooling in Ireland. My grandfather couldn't read and write. I nearly died of rheumatic fever when I was 3 years of age. I made it to university, but I struggled socially when I got there. I'd never been in a restaurant. I'd never been in a train. I got to university at the time of the miners' strike and found that didn't fit in. I did 18 months unemployed in the mid-80s, 18 months working in a sausage factory, began managing social housing that I'd grown up in, and ended up managing several £1 million of regeneration money in the early part of the 2000s. I dropped out, I took redundancy to pursue my poetry in 2011, and these days after the Manchester bomb, I was honoured with an honorary doctorate, Doctor of Letters, by the University of Salford, ironically, the university that I dropped out of. I'm going to share a poem. We've had Kit Duval on earlier in the conference, I believe, and this, Peter tells me, would make a nice bookend to the conference. Kit, as you know, instigated and edited a wonderful anthology called Common People, published by Unbounders a couple of years ago, an anthology of working class writing, which I'd really encourage you to track down. This is the poem that opened that book, and Peter tells me would make a nice closing note for the conference today. Thank you for what you've done. It sounds like a really important event that I look forward to watching the video back and being involved in the future. Here's my poem, Tough. They don't like it when we make it, despite all their ifs and cuts. They don't like it when we take it as our right to shake things up. They don't like it when rough voices start demanding better choices, but it's tough. We've had enough. We are coming. They don't like it when our stories rise above the kitchen sink. They don't like it when we learn, remember, organise or think. They don't like it when we've knowledge, so they price us out of college, but it's tough. We've had enough. We are coming. They don't like it when we're standing on our own terms. They don't like it when our candle lights another so it burns. They don't like it when we're spotted in a slot they've not allotted, but it's tough. We've had enough, and we are coming. They don't like it when we uppity and throw a ladder down. They don't like it when we've sussed it and we grow and gather round. They don't like it when we minions have articulate opinions, but it's tough. We've had enough, and we are coming. They don't like it when our pens begin to join up all the dots. They don't like it when we send what we have learned to the have-nots. They don't like it when our writers can ignite us into fighters, but it's tough. We've had enough, and we are coming. They don't like it when the common people sing a single song. They don't like it when forgotten people realise we're strong. They don't like when race and gender join with class as one agenda. They don't like when race and gender join with class as one agenda. They don't like when race and gender join with class as one agenda, but it's tough. We've had enough, and we are coming. They don't like it when our classes are not coward, but empowered. They don't like it when the masses clock the power that is ours. They don't like it when their victims will not suck their fucking dictums, but it's tough. We've had enough, and we are coming millions strong. It's tough. We've had enough. We are coming. Thank you for listening. Well done, everybody, today. Let's keep coming. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Oh, well, thank you, Tony. That was superb. Thank you, thank you. I'm clapping because I know everybody else is clapping and you can't hear them. That was absolutely world class. Thank you. Thank you. And on that, there's going to be no more. This is it. We're going to stay together. We're going to be together. This is the beginning of something, not the end. What an end it's been, but it's not the end. It's the beginning. We are coming, Tony. We are coming. So thank you very much. Everybody stay in touch via the website, the emails, whatever. Stay in touch with each other. Stay in touch with us. We'll do whatever comes next. I don't know what that's going to be. It's going to be journals, it's going to be books, it's going to be conferences, it's going to be something fabulous again. But thank you, everyone. It's been a brilliant 2 days. I'm drained, I'm exhausted. I'm over the moon. I said yesterday in the morning that everything has to begin with a dream. How poor would a revolution be without a dream to begin it? This has been a dream. Do you know, more than anybody, I'm sure none of us could have seen that this was going to be as great as it was. But it has been so absolutely brilliant. Thank you very, very much indeed. We're going to send the videos out. We're going to send this big long chat out with such a, I'll just read that just to cheer myself up. But it's been excellent. Thank you. Goodbye.